The offseason is among us, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about. It's been a minute since I've been here, but we got a little bit of revamping going on this offseason. I call it the offseason because it gives me an opportunity to progress in my project. And also, the offseason is just a stage of what is to make the following football season. And we're going to recap slowly and shortly what happened this past year. But real quick, I do want to ask for you to comment, like, and subscribe down below. You can check me out on TikTok. I've been very active on their Master CFB show on TikTok. Now, the Michigan Wolverines, congratulations. 2024 national champions. There's no asterisk next to it if you ask me. I don't think there should be. They won it fair and square. Like, they were the best team. They had such an experienced roster, one that went toe-to-toe with all the better rosters in America, and they ended up getting it done, whether it was against Penn State, Ohio State, or Alabama or Washington. They won all these games, and for anybody wanting to say, well, they dodged Georgia, I hate to break it to you, they didn't dodge Georgia. Georgia didn't do their end. Georgia didn't hold up. That's what happened to Georgia. Michigan didn't dodge anything. Michigan was there, willing to play whoever was across from them. And whether or not Georgia would have won that game doesn't matter. Georgia didn't win all their games, and Michigan did. Michigan, fantastic football team, did it in a different way than all these other national champions, and that needs to be commended. Now that transitions us to their coach, Jim Harbaugh. It's looking like he's finalizing a deal with the Chargers, and any minute he should be announced as the head coach of the Chargers, whether it is tomorrow, whether it's tonight, whether it's the next day. He should be, by the end of the week, announced as the Chargers head coach. So what is Michigan going to do? Well, there's some people who do think that Brian Kelly is going to go over to Michigan. I don't believe that to be the case. I believe Jerome Moore's the guy, which means I don't think anybody's stealing anything from that roster. Now, what exactly is there to steal? There's a good bit for you to steal. You got a defensive line that's going to be really spanking good next season. Really spanking good. And you got to start with the two juniors that are rising up, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Those two at defensive tackle are awesome. Josiah Stewart's another one that you got to watch out for. They're going to be really good right there. And then Ernest Hausman, a linebacker, is the headline that we're going to talk about all offseason. Their roster is going to be fine. Rod Moore's coming back in that secondary along with Keon Sabb, and most notably, who I think is the best cornerback in America, Will Johnson. None of those guys are leaving. I don't think any of them are leaving if Sharon Moore is the head coach. And I don't think any of those guys want to leave anyway. I don't think that the NCAA is going to immediately impact Michigan to the point where all these guys are going to want to leave now and immediately. If something were to change from now to the start of the season, we'll figure that out. So Michigan moving forward is going to have a roster that is made up of some of the better players off of this national championship team. But they're going to be replacing a lot as well. When you're talking about the offensive side of the ball, you have one guy who was a full-time starter coming back for the Michigan Wolverines, and that's Colson Loveland, the tight end. All five of their, in fact, you would say their top six offensive linemen are all gone. Graduation or NFL draft, all of them pretty much graduated, right? J.J. McCarthy at quarterback, gone. Blake Corum at running back, gone. You do keep Donovan Edwards, which is big, but your top two receivers were Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson. Now, I think a lot of Michigan fans will agree with me when I say this. Losing those two, it's whatever, because you have Tyler Morris and Samaj Morgan waiting in the wings. But nonetheless, that's production that is still gone, and production from the last 3 seasons for the Michigan Wolverines. So there's going to be a lot of new faces. There's going to be a brand new staff, because a lot of word is Jesse Minter's going with Jim Harbaugh to the NFL. And if this stuff does come to fruition, I think we need to talk about the Michigan Wolverines in the light of which they are going to basically prove that they're a program that can sustain. Because I don't know if they are, especially in the new Big Ten with the schedule they're going to have. I mean, road game at or at Washington, road game at Ohio State. They play Texas out of conference. They play USC. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy for the Michigan Wolverines. I think that the Wolverines have a tremendous opportunity to prove something, but I also think they have a huge, huge moment right now happening in their program to see if they can actually sustain moving forward the success that they had found in the last 3 seasons. All right. The second part of this video that I'm making, and a lot of these are going to be shorter format. We're going to try to do a little bit different of just like I need to find an intro clip that works with the copyright claims and stuff like that. Need to do that. Need to be working on that. We're going to be working on the presentation here. I'm going to be, moving here in the next couple of months. So obviously the background look is going to be different. But these are going to be shorter format, just a couple of topics, so that way we can get more videos pushed out on a regular basis. But again, if you want to have more, contact and conversation with me, go over to TikTok. You can find me very easily. A lot of my TikToks have been some of the bigger videos that I have had. And I'm one of the people talking college football on TikTok. You can't miss me. You just can't. You'll find me if you really look around. I'm a lot bigger on TikTok than I am on YouTube. I would recommend going over there, and I hope that you guys like this enough to subscribe on YouTube, but also follow over there on TikTok. Who has impacted the portal in 2024 the strongest? I got 5 schools, and I made a TikTok about this. So again, this is no surprise, but we go further in depth here. The first school I'm going to bring up is the obvious one. Caleb Downs is on the thumbnail. It's the Ohio State Buckeyes. And while their impact had been very little when it comes to how many players they actually added in the transfer portal, they ended up getting a lot of impactful players. You start with a couple of players from Alabama. Seth McLaughlin, the offensive lineman. A lot of people give him a lot of problems with his snapping, or a lot of people kind of have given him a lot of criticism with his problem snapping, snapping the actual football. But this has been a really good offensive lineman for Alabama. Here's the thing. Ohio State's returning 4 of their 5 starters on the offensive line. Donovan Jackson, massive surprise as far as returning. And that is a whole nother conversation. And we're going to have an Ohio State show as one of these 5-day or 5 shows a week kind of thing, one every single day. We're going to be having the Ohio State show coming up. In the Ohio State show, I'm going to break that down a whole lot more as far as what does Ohio State really have returning over what they have coming in, because you're going to get that general talk when we talk about transfer portal and general rosters all throughout the offseason. But the one thing you're going to get with those Buckeye videos once a week, I'm going to put it right in the middle on Wednesday, so you can skip it if you want. But I would suggest if you want good coverage of Ohio State, you come over here. Not to spend too much time on Ohio State for that reason. Seth McLaughlin comes into an offensive line where 4 of the 5 starters from last year are coming back. He adds a whole lot of depth, and there's a chance he's going to be playing guard. Who else do they add? Caleb Downs, the safety. Just going with the already pretty stacked group for Ohio State. That defense returns almost everybody, and you add Caleb Downs to them, make sure that's fantastic. They also added Quinshon Judkins. The Ole Miss running back was a really good running back, 2,700 yards. Will Howard also out of the portal, and then Julian Sayin, both of them quarterbacks. Julian Sayin going and competing with his classmate, essentially, with Aaron Nolan. And we'll see how that works out for the future of the program. But Ohio State, nationally, a lot of conversation about what they have done in the portal. As a Buckeye fan myself, I am pleased with what they've done in the portal. I think it's a little bit overblown personally. I think expecting Ohio State to win the national championship off of a portal class alone. Now, again, we'll talk about the returning players, but a portal class alone of about 5 kids, yeah, they're studs, specifically the 3, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, and then you add in Julian Sayin, but that's future play. You're talking about a situation where that's not going to make a national championship team. We'll talk later on about what will make Ohio State a national championship team, but guess what? Michigan did that very well in filling the transfer portal or filling their roster with transfer portal players that were very much in a place of need, kind of fill a little bit of holes. You know who else did that? The Texas Longhorns. Texas went to the portal and they added a handful of wide receivers. Isaiah Bond, the most notable one, and I do not want to gloss over that because I do think Bond has a chance to be a really good player at Texas. But the two that are going under the radar is Matthew Golden, the Houston transfer, who, has had so many different moments and had a lot of production with a quarterback that I don't really think is an elite thrower of the football whatsoever in Donovan Smith. And then you go to the number one dynamic weapon that Oregon State and Jonathan Smith has had for the last 2 years, Silas Bolden. Now, you could talk to me about Damian Martinez, but the bottom line is they use Silas Bolden so many different ways. He played X. He played slot. He played a lot of motion. He was a jet sweep type of player. He was a return type of player. He did everything for Oregon State as far as the skill position goes. He took handoffs. He caught the ball. He played in the slot. And I think that slot receiver role is where he's going to primarily fit. Now, this is a very good complementary piece, and all three of these are good complementary pieces to Texas's roster because of the fact that they are younger at the wide receiver core. Jonte Cook is expected to take that jump. You got a true freshman 5-star Ryan Wingo. We'll see if he ends up playing early. But you add that into the mixture of what you have with the returning fourth-year quarterback, a good offensive line, and a good running back that is proven going into his sophomore year in Cedric Baxter, excuse me. And then, you just talk about what Sark has been able to build at Texas. You're looking at a program that is ready, locked and loaded to go in the SEC. And the transfer portal ads that they had is a big part of that. Well done by Texas, and also well done by their conference mate, Ole Miss. Ole Miss did lose Quinshon Judkins to the portal. I don't want to gloss over that. But when you add in the impact that they have had, you add in a guy like Walter Nolan, who was for the longest time the number one player in the portal until Caleb Downs came around. And you add in a wide receiver threat for Jackson Arnold and Juice Wells. You plug little pieces here and there for Ole Miss, and that's what I love about what Lane Kiffin did in the transfer portal with this Ole Miss roster, the third team I'm talking about with Ole Miss. The holes that you plug from an already really good team in a 10-2 spot in which you get a pretty favorable schedule. Your toughest games are at home. You play Georgia at home specifically, and 10-2 is good enough to get you to the playoff as well. I like what Ole Miss is doing. I really like what Ole Miss is doing. Now, again, losing Quinshon Judkins, somewhat of a big deal, but they're bringing back a ton already off of the 10-2 roster, and they're bringing in a ton out of the transfer portal. This Ole Miss team could feel a lot like Washington, where a lot of people might be hesitant to pick them to actually do something this upcoming season. But again, if you look at what their roster makeup, what they bring back with an experienced quarterback in Jackson Dart, they'll figure out the run game. You have guys come in like Walter Nolan and then like Princely Uman Milan to help out that front seven. Chris Paul Jr. He's a great player from Arkansas, if you don't know who he is. Trey Amos, who played a lot for Alabama in that secondary. Yam Banks, another secondary player who's good at. Talk about losing a guy in the transfer portal when it comes to a running back. Yeah, he's no Quinshon Judkins, but Logan Diggs adds that depth at running back. Everything that you could have asked Ole Miss to do, they did it in the transfer portal. And that's all you got to talk about. That's all you can talk about. And that's all that matters. The fourth team I want to talk about is Missouri. Now, Missouri had a very solid squad this past year. They went 11-2, or 10-3, rather. Was it? No, 11-2. I'm right. Beat Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl in a game a lot of people did not really recognize Missouri really as much as they should have. And I find it fascinating because I picked Missouri to do well in the regular season. A lot of people hesitated on pulling the trigger on Missouri. A lot of people thought they'd place last in the SEC East, which I never understood, but I digress. If you look at what Missouri has done in the portal, adding Caden Green for starters, the offensive lineman from Oklahoma really adds an element of security to Brady Cook and this offense. But you also got to talk about the two big time players that they added at the running back position from the group of five. Marcus Carroll out of Georgia State was probably the best group of five running back. And oh, yeah, a guy that Elijah Drinkwitz recruited out of high school, Nate Noel, is coming into town as well from Appalachian State. Nate Noel, a power back. Marcus Carroll, a do everything back. I really like what we see here. You add in other guys in Toriano Pride, rather, a good corner who's got some big shoes to fill with Ennis Rakestraw leaving. And then you get Darius Smith, a depth piece from Georgia, is going to come in and start more than likely. They plugged it in the right spots. When you replace any offensive lineman with a guy like Caden Green, you're winning. And then also those two running backs, you're replacing Cody Schrader with them. You're adding them to the mix with that passing attack, headlined by Luther Burden out wide. Missouri's going to be dangerous. And the fifth and final team out of the SEC, now back full circle to the Big Ten, we have Oregon. My goodness, Oregon might have had the best transfer portal class that nobody is talking about. And all I need to highlight to you guys is the duo that you're going to get from Dylan Gabriel and Evan Stewart. The Texas A&M transfer is a wide receiver I've been high on since he came out in high school. He was a really good player in high school. I really liked him. And you saw Dylan Gabriel. He was a Heisman favorite in week 6, week 7. Somewhat deep into the season. I really like what they have been able to do in the portal. They added Dante Moore for the future. We talked about that with Julian Sayin in Ohio State, adding a guy for the future. Well, Dante Moore has starting experience. He's like, it's cool. I'll sit for a year. I'll learn from Dylan, and I'll be the guy next year. So that's good for the future when you're talking about Oregon. You add Cam Alexander, which he's from UTSA. He's teammates, by the way. He's a quarterback on that defense for UTSA. I totally forgot to mention Trey Moore when I was talking about Texas. My gosh, that kid's a freak. About 20 sacks last year. Insane. Anyway, you add Kobe Savage as well. And then Brandon Johnson, I think, is a really good piece that they added at the cornerback spot, who's going to go opposite of what we talked about with Cam Alexander, except he's more ready to play. Brandon Johnson was absolute freak show for that Duke defense, a Duke defense that really kept them in games late in the season when Riley Leonard was hurt, but also a Duke defense that had been great all season long. Brandon Johnson was the main vocal point of that when it comes to that secondary. I really like what Oregon did. I really liked what all 5 of these teams have done in the portal. And we might talk about it a little bit more. We'll see what happens with Michigan as they open up their roster. Tuning in. Really appreciate it. You guys have a nice rest of your day.